Montreal was once at the brink of bankruptcy. Before the city was known for its poutine and its vibrant nightlife, Montreal used to be an industrial city back in the 60s, with most of its population working in factories. The city wasn't known on the international scene 60 years ago, but a new mayor was about to change the face of the city forever. Mayor Drapeau ordered the city to build a subway in 1961 in order to modernize the city. In that same year, he organized the International and Universal Exposition of 1967. Montreal was about to have its big break on the international scene. The city needed to prepare for the Expo 67. The Saint Helens Island was the perfect location, very close to downtown Montreal, and a subway line was made to reach the island. The only problem was that the island was too small to welcome that many people, so the city used the rocks and dirt excavated from the subway to enlarge the already existing island. The exposition was a great success for the city of Montreal, setting a record for the most people in attendance for any exposition around the world. Following this great success, the Mayor Drapeau, with his sense of invincibility, would apply for the 1976 Summer Olympic Games, which was awarded to Montreal in May of 1970. The nomination pushed Montreal in a race against the clock. The city was in urgent need of new infrastructures to welcome the games. Quickly, a committee was assembled under the mayor's supervision. The task in front of them was gigantic, one of the biggest infrastructural challenges the world had ever seen. The construction site had more than 3,000 workers on a daily basis, but questions about how Montreal would finance such games started surfacing from the media and the population. The mayor's office said they would be transparent about the project. Their initial budget was $120 million, but quickly they realized that it was going to be much more than that. 2 years after the start of the construction, the budget was increased to $310 million. Mayor Drapeau was famous for saying that it would be the first ever self-financing Olympic Games in the history. His plan to pay for all of this would be to create special currencies, postage stamps, and a new lottery with a grand prize of $1 million. In September of 1975, 1 year before the opening ceremony, the Prime Minister Bourassa convoked the mayor's team to an urgent meeting. The Prime Minister wants to know exactly how much would the Olympic Games cost to Montreal, but most importantly, if the infrastructures would be ready on time. The mayor confirmed to the Prime Minister that everything would be ready on time and that the final budget would be $610 million. The Prime Minister was skeptical of the mayor's statement. Seeing that the construction was late on the timeline, he was worried. Finally, in July of 1975, Prime Minister Bourassa had seen enough. Fearing the worst possible scenario of not being capable of presenting the Olympic Games, he created his own team and pushed the mayors aside, taking complete takeover of the project. The Quebec government was now at the wheel of an already sinking ship. By somewhat workers called a miracle, they finished the stadium just on time for the opening ceremony. Even if the iconic mat of the Olympic Stadium wasn't built, the Montreal Olympics were, from a point of view of athleticism, one of the best Olympics in the history. For example, it was home of the first ever perfect 10 in gymnastics by the Romanian Nadia Comaneci, which as a result became Quebec's sweetheart. However, on the economic point of view, the Olympics were a disaster for the city of Montreal. The mayor's efforts to self-finance the Olympic Games with his lottery and other sources were not even close to being enough. It was so bad that a commission was put in place in 1977 by Prime Minister Bourassa to uncover what went wrong with the project under the mayor's team. 3 years later, in 1980, the commission shed light on the massive corruption that took place while building the Olympics infrastructures. An ex-worker explained that trucks full of construction materials would drive on the site, get paid for the materials, drive off the site without unloading anything, drive around the block, and come right back in to get paid a second time for the same materials. The commission uncovered that it was costing the city an average of $500,000 per day per truck doing this scam. Another instance of corruption that took place was the rental of mechanical cranes. At one point, a worker counted 97 cranes on the stadium site, where most of the cranes were parked and only 4 were active. And that's only scratching the surface of the corruption that took place under the mayor's team. The commission also shed light on the massive all-out war 2 unions fought during the construction. Workers stated that they would build something during the day just for it to be destroyed during the night. Apparently, it was a never-ending cycle of workers from one union building something just for the other union to destroy it. There was countless cases of sabotage and vandalism throughout the whole project, but the corruption and the problems with unions weren't the only issue with this project. The inflation also had a major role in this economic disaster. Between the year 1970 and 1976, it went up by 40%. That means that the same ton of steel that was paid $200 at the beginning of the construction was now $1,200 by the end of 1976. The workers also had a deal with the city that they will receive a 2.5% yearly increase of their salaries. But at that point, it was simply not following the inflation. The city refused to modify the deal they had with the workers, so the workers went on strike over and over again. In total, the workers went on strike for 155 days, which was roughly 30% of the total amount of days the city had to build everything. A lot of people in Quebec believed that if the government didn't take over the entire project, that the Olympics could have been cancelled. The stadium alone costed more than $1 billion, but since the Quebec government took over the project, they were left with the bill, which saved the Montreal city from almost being bankrupt. Montreal might have broke the record for the highest overrun cost, but they also broke the record for the most money generated by an Olympic Games at that time. But still, the Quebec government had to find a way to repay for the debt that the Olympics left behind. That's when the Ontario government gave the idea of taxing a very unhealthy product, the cigarettes. Even with about 50% of the population smoking at that time, it would take 30 years for the Quebec government to repay the debt the Olympics left behind. The Mayor Drapeau was never accused of corruption, nor anyone else, even though it was obvious from the commission that some engineering firms made tens of millions by charging for work they never done. Mayor Drapeau wasn't wrong when he said that the games could be self-financing. After all, the Montreal Olympic Games generated $430 million in revenue. But because Montreal went 13 times over the initial budget, the games left the Quebec province with more than $1 billion in debt. Even if the Olympics left a huge deficit behind, the city still invented a model for the Olympics that many more cities would follow over the years in order to make their Olympic Games profitable. Thank you for watching. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to Market Failure. You can also watch this video on screen right now. Until then, I'm Lou, and I'll see you in the next one.